So the other day, we left Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we were headed to Iuka, Mississippi. We needed to have some work done on the boat. It's about a 200-mile journey between Chattanooga and Iuka. So while we were still in the Tennessee area, we came to the Nickajack Dam. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to explain to everyone what it is when we say we're locking through. So the first thing that we normally do is, well, we always do, is we call the dam, the lockmaster of the dam, and let them know that we're getting close and we'd like to lock through. And they'll prepare, as long as there's not a bunch of other boats and ships and barges waiting, they'll prepare the chamber of the lock for us, which includes raising or lowering the water level in the chamber to the appropriate level for us. So we're going downstream here, so they're going to raise the water level to the appropriate level so we can just drive right into the chamber. Another thing they do is, if there's no waiting and the water level is at the appropriate level, then they'll open the door on this end here that we can just drive right into the chamber. And then once we get in the chamber, we will tie the boat to the wall of the chamber. We can tie either to the left or the right. We usually look to see if there's a lot of debris floating in the chamber, giant logs and things like that, and we'll try to go on the side that doesn't have all of that. So in this particular chamber, there was a little bit of a debris, but it really didn't make a difference which side we went on, so we just went on the left side here, or the port side. And so what's involved with that is, I'm trying to drive the boat, get it close to the wall without crashing in anything, and Wendy will take just a single rope and tie it from about the middle of the boat to a device built into the side wall of the chamber called a bollard. It's a floating bollard. So as the water level goes down, the floating bollard goes down, water level goes up, the bollard goes up, right? So she'll tie to that. We also have a couple of large rubber balls out, one in the front of the boat, one in the back of the boat, that kind of cushion the boat impacting up against the cement wall. So the boat's not really going to get damaged by floating around in the chamber there. But you'll see Wendy, you'll see her show up out there with her little recovery stick there, and she tries to keep the boat away from the wall a little bit. Now, like I said, those fenders will keep the boat from getting damaged, but we like to try to keep those fenders clean. You can imagine the river water and those cement walls. There's a lot of bacteria and algae and goo on the wall of those chambers, so we just try to keep those fenders sort of clean. So I'm pulling up next to a bollard. This section here is not a bollard. That's a ladder that the maintenance people used to go up and down inside the chamber. But that yellow stripe you'll see coming up on the wall there, that's the floating bollard. And that's where I'm trying to pull up as close as I can to it, like I said, without crashing the boat into it. And so Wendy will put a rope around the yellow tip of that bollard in there. And then once we get tied off securely to that bollard, I'll radio the lockmaster, let them know we're secured. They'll close the gate that we just came in, and they'll start letting the water out of the chamber. There's probably 25, 30 feet of water that they'll let out. They'll blow the air horn to let us know it's okay to, untie the rope and head out of the gate down there at the other end. Most of these chambers, most of these locks, it takes us probably 20 minutes to get through it. So not so bad. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fast forward this video so you'll see the water empty out a little quicker. Right here, if you look down at the end of the chamber, you'll see that the gate down there is opening slowly. So that means we've reached the bottom of the chamber. They've let out as much water as they need to. When that gate down there opens up all the way, they'll sound an air horn. Wendy will untie the boat and we will head out. So here we go. Let me speed this up again. Okay, now here is an example of something that's same thing, only different. This is another dam that we came to a couple weeks later when we finally went back down to Mississippi to get the boat to bring it back to Indiana. We were headed north, still going downstream, and then near Rogersville, Alabama, or real close to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, if you've ever heard of that, is this dam. It's the Wilson Dam. So this dam has two chambers in this auxiliary path here. There's a 94-foot drop, if you will, between upstream and downstream. And so that's kind of a lot of water. So they've broken it up with two chambers. So the first chamber will lower you 50 feet or so, I don't remember exactly. And then the second chamber lowered you like 40 some feet. Normally, like I said, it takes us 20 minutes to get through a lock. This time it took us 3 hours to get through. And they don't always tell you up front that there's a delay. You'll see in a little bit here that we'll move into this chamber. But after a while, I called the lockmaster up and asked them what was going on, and they're always super nice to talk to. But he explained that we were waiting on another recreational vessel that was headed upstream. So it would have been more economical and efficient, for us to wait until that boat got into the lower chamber, and then they would lower us and raise them at the same time. And we would pass each other and then, raise and lower each of us appropriately, and then we would head on out. So that's what the holdup on this one was. But you'll see here, we'll move out a little bit into this chamber. One thing about this dam, and not all dams are the same, or not all locks are the same. This lock, it doesn't have a swinging gate at this entrance here. It has a large metal panel of a gate, and the whole thing just lowers down below the water, and it's going to lower down far enough that our boat won't hit it when we go into the lock here. This dam, all dams, as a matter of fact, have two paths or two locks that will take you through the dam. There's the auxiliary lock, which is smaller and pretty good for recreational vessels like ours. But then there's a larger main lock that is designed for large tows. And a tow is a tug pushing barges. And those can be as big as 15 barges. So that's quite a bit of real estate there. So those large chambers, you could put a 15 barge tow in. They'll do the same thing like us, lower it, raise it, and then the barge moves on, right? The tow will move on. Well, this main chamber on this lock was damaged, and so it was being repaired. And so now what happens is when a barge or when a tow needs to lock through, they have to break that barge up into several pieces in order for it to fit into the smaller auxiliary lock and make its way through the dam. So you can imagine it's a lot of work. Let's say, for example, the barge is going downstream. Where we waited, they'll take the barge apart, move one barge into the chamber, take it down out the other side, tie it up somewhere, come back and get another section of the barge, put it in the chamber, take it down, send it out, tie it up to that barge. And it just takes a while for all this to happen. There was one report I read that a barge that shows up to this dam can likely wait 18 days to get through. So a big pain in the you-know-what. This damage that's being repaired occurred in September 2024, and the lock should be open about June or so, I guess, 2025. So we waited here, like I said, for quite a while, but instead of sitting here waiting, I'm going to fast forward this video here a little bit so you can see the water drop out a little quicker. So hang in there. Okay, so we finally made it through the Wilson lock. Like I said, it took about 3 hours, but still I can't complain, because if I was part of a tow trying to push some barges through here, it could take anywhere from, let's see what I wrote down here, anywhere from 16 to 24 hours to get through. And that's if your tow is, up to go through. It takes that long to break all those barges up and send them through. So if you're interested for some mansplaining, how about a few tidbits about the Wilson lock and locks in general? So the auxiliary locks are 60 feet wide by 300 feet long, where the main lock that the tows go through, 110 feet wide and 600 feet long. The main lock, so the dam was built in 1924, but that larger main lock through this dam was built in 1959. In 2021, there's a floating guide wall that I'll show you here in a little bit. A floating guide wall is what the barge or the tow pulls up next to make sure that they're lined up correctly to go into the chamber, so they don't go in all cockeyed and damage any of the concrete inside there. So that's the importance of the guide wall. Well, in 2021, it broke off the Wilson Dam and it sank. Well, they decided that everything would be okay and they weren't going to do anything about it. But then, like I said, in September of 2024, the gates, I don't know if I explained this before, but the gates in the main chamber that, open and close, the spindles that they rotate on under the water cracked and broke. So that was a major construction project there that, like I said, I think they finished it in June of 25. They were supposed to finish, it was originally scheduled to be repaired in April, but there was so much rain in the spring and so much flooding that the water was spilling over the dam and they couldn't do any of the repairs that they needed to do. So they had to wait for the flooding, the rains to subside, and then pump all that extra water out of there. Most of the dams on the Ohio River are 75 years old, and like I said, have not had a lot of regular maintenance done to them. Some of the things I took off the interweb, like I said, I read an article that said it may take, the longest wait someone had was 18 days. That's, when they show up and they have to wait their turn to go through. They show up 18 days later, they get through. Somebody else had said that a normal trip up or down the Tennessee River on their regular route took them 6 days. Barge down to where it needs to go and back 6 days. Because this dam was closed, now it took them 28 days. So that's kind of equivalent to going from a week turnaround to a month turnaround. So that really impacted a lot of businesses along the river that counted on this. So what I'm going to do here is show you a picture, an aerial view of the Wilson Lock, so you can get a better idea of what the whole thing looks like from a bigger picture here. So hang on there. So here's the aerial view of mainly the lock. You can see the dam off to the right there, but both of those chambers on the lock. The one in the center is that main chamber that tows will go through without having to get broken up. And then the two chambers on the left look like stair steps. That's the one that we went through. And then the guide wall is located here and here. And like I said, those keep or they make sure that barges go in as straight as they can, so they don't do any damage to the cement walls inside the chamber by, a corner of a barge scraping along the cement wall and degrading the integrity of it and structural properties, and then we start getting leaks and so on. So anyway, sorry about the mansplaining. I just couldn't help myself. And I guess the next time something interesting happens, I'll try to put it in a video. All right. Take care, y'all.